Hey folks, welcome back to True Crime Stories, where we cover the most thrilling true crime stories. Before we get going, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for me. Thanks. And now let's get into today's story.
Welcome to another deep dive with us.
Yeah.
This time we're heading to the Pacific Northwest, to a small town called Pinewood Grove.
Sounds idyllic.
It really does. That's kind of the point. This is one of those cases where the setting really, I guess, heightens the contrast, you know?
Picturesque town, brutal crime.
Yeah, small town secrets, that kind of thing.
Classic.
So Pinewood Grove, it's known for its, lush forests, pristine lakes. It's late spring, so you can imagine cherry blossoms in full bloom. And right in the middle of this picture-perfect scene, a murder rocks the community to its core.
And the victim.
Jenna Thomas, a passionate environmental activist.
I read that she was deeply involved in a campaign against illegal logging practices, ones that were threatening the old-growth forests surrounding the town.
Right, and her activism put her at odds with powerful interests in Pinewood Grove, in particular a company called Evergreen Timber Co.
Evergreen Timber. Weren't they pushing for that controversial new logging project?
Exactly, the one Jenna was fighting against.
So right away you have a potential motive. Someone wanted her silenced.
And it seems like her work to protect the forests was the most likely reason.
High stakes. Jenna was a formidable opponent, not afraid to speak truth to power,
And her campaign was gaining momentum.
making her a target.
Now enter Clara Vance, an environmental journalist returning to her hometown after years away, drawn back by this story about illegal logging.
But instead of just finding a story, she stumbles upon something far more sinister,
Yeah, it's not just about the story anymore. It becomes very personal for her.
personal and dangerous.
So let's set the scene. It's a tranquil evening in late spring. Clara, she's seeking inspiration for her article, decides to hike to a secluded clearing, a place she and Jenna used to visit as kids, share dreams and secrets amidst the, towering trees and whispering pines.
Almost a sacred space for them.
Right. But on this evening, the tranquility is shattered.
Clara finds Jenna's body.
Yeah, lying amidst fallen branches and wildflowers. The details are pretty chilling. There's a torn piece of fabric from Jenna's jacket nearby, and signs of blunt force trauma. Suggests a struggle.
It must have been horrifying for Clara, finding a childhood friend murdered in such a serene location.
It goes from a story to a deeply personal tragedy for her. And from that moment on, she becomes consumed by the need to uncover the truth.
Not just journalistic curiosity, now it's about seeking justice for Jenna, understanding the darkness that has invaded her hometown.
This throws Pinewood Grove into chaos. Whispers and suspicion spread like wildfire through the community. Everyone's a potential suspect, and the idyllic facade of the town begins to crumble as long-held secrets and resentment surface.
So who are the key players in this drama?
Well, the investigation, led by Sheriff Elaine Stokes, quickly identifies several individuals with potential motives.
Let's go through them one by one.
Okay, so first we have Henry Vance Clare's estranged father.
He heads a local conservation group, right?
Yeah, one that's been negotiating with logging companies. So the question is, could his desire to maintain the status quo have put him at odds with Jenna's activism?
Interesting.
Then there's Everyman Davis, a representative of the Evergreen Timber Co.
The very company Jenna was campaigning against.
He's openly hostile towards her efforts and has a lot to lose if her campaign succeeds.
Can't rule him out.
And then we have Alana Rivers.
The newcomer who owns that boutique.
Right, the one that sells eco-friendly products. On the surface, her interests seem aligned with Jenna's, but there are whispers of jealousy and competition between them.
So this rivalry could have escalated?
Possibly.
What about Liam Adler?
Liam Berla. He's a bartender at the Greenleaf Tavern, a close friend of Jenna's. He actually confided in Clara about Jenna's growing fear and the anonymous threats she had been receiving.
So he was worried about her safety.
Yeah, in the weeks leading up to her death, he urged her to be cautious.
Okay, and lastly?
Councilman Barry Scott, a longtime advocate for the logging industry with clear ties to Evergreen Timber Co. He saw Jenna's activism as a threat to the town's economic growth, and they clashed publicly on numerous occasions.
So we have a tangled web of suspects, each with their own secrets and potential motives.
Classic whodunit. Everyone's hiding something.
And as the investigation progresses, Clara's navigating not only the complexities of the case, but also her own personal struggles. The strained relationship with her father, her rekindled feelings for Liam, and her growing disillusionment with Pinewood Grove all add another layer to her quest for the truth.
So what about the hard evidence? What did the investigators find?
Well, the autopsy reveals that Jenna died from blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with a struggle.
Defensive wounds.
Yeah, which further confirmed that she fought back against her attacker.
And remember that torn piece of fabric from Jenna's jacket?
Right, the one found at the crime scene.
It turns out to be a crucial piece of evidence. It's a unique fabric used in a limited edition collection.
Sold exclusively at Alana Rivers' boutique.
Exactly, which puts her squarely in the spotlight.
Appearances can be deceiving, especially in a town like Pinewood Grove where everyone seems to have something to hide.
But just when we think we're zeroing in on Alana,
Another twist.
forensic science enters the picture.
Remember those defensive wounds on Jenna's body? During the autopsy, the medical examiner collected a tiny amount of DNA from under her fingernails.
Could this DNA finally reveal the identity of Jenna's attacker?
It's a potential game changer. The lab results reveal a partial DNA match.
And it points to
Everyman Davis.
the logging company representative, the one with the most obvious motive, now linked to the crime scene through DNA evidence.
This puts Sheriff Stokes and her team on high alert.
They need to figure out how this DNA evidence fits into the bigger picture.
Was Everyman truly the attacker, or could there be another explanation?
This revelation sends shockwaves through Pinewood Grove. The illusion of innocence is shattered. The town is forced to confront a darker side of its identity, one where greed and desperation can drive individuals to extreme measures.
And Sheriff Stokes, armed with this new evidence, brings Everyman in for questioning.
That interrogation must have been intense.
A battle of wills between a seasoned investigator and a man trying to maintain his composure despite the mounting evidence against him.
So under pressure, with the DNA evidence looming over him, Everyman cracks.
He does. And in a startling confession, admits to meeting with Jenna on the night of her death.
What did he say about the meeting?
He claims that he wanted to negotiate with Jenna to try and convince her to soften her stance on the logging project.
What?
But the conversation escalated into a heated argument, and in a moment of rage, he struck her.
So he's admitting to manslaughter?
But not premeditated murder. He insists that he never intended to kill her.
A crime of passion. A tragic accident in the heat of the moment.
That's his story, but does it fully align with the evidence?
The defensive wounds suggest a struggle, a fight for her life.
So the question remains, does Everyman's confession tell the whole story? Or are there deeper secrets still hidden beneath the surface of this case?
We'll have to wait until part 2 to delve into those questions and explore the trial that grips the town as they seek justice for Jenna. We left off with Everyman Davis's confession. A dramatic twist, but left everyone wondering, was that really the whole story?
Did it answer all the questions?
Right. Pinewood Grove was bracing itself for a trial, and you can just feel the tension.
The whole community was watching. It wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was very personal for them.
This trial became the stage for all the conflicting values and hidden tensions in Pinewood Grove to come out.
On one side, you had people who thought Everyman was a scapegoat, a victim of circumstance caught in a moment of passion. And then there were those who believed he was a cold-blooded killer.
So how did the trial unfold?
Well, the prosecution, they built their case around Everyman's motive and that physical evidence. They painted him as a man driven by greed and desperation, willing to do whatever it took to protect his company's profits.
They brought up his past outbursts at community meetings and his attempts to intimidate Jenna. And of course, they kept hammering on that DNA evidence.
It was a strong case, especially with the confession.
But the defense had their work cut out for them. What was their strategy?
They tried to humanize Everyman, portray him as flawed,
Yeah.
but ultimately a decent man who made a terrible mistake.
So they were trying to shift the narrative.
Exactly. They argued that the DNA evidence, while it put him at the scene, didn't necessarily prove that he was the killer.
Maybe he stumbled upon Jenna after the attack, tried to help, and that's how his DNA got there.
It's possible. And they also emphasized that there wasn't any premeditation.
The confession pointed to a crime of passion, not a planned murder.
Right, a spontaneous act of violence. They were appealing to the jury's empathy.
Trying to make every man's actions understandable.
In a way.
But what about Jenna? Did her voice get lost in all of this?
That's where Clara's testimony became so important. Remember, she was one of Jenna's closest friends.
And she had been following Jenna's activism really closely.
She took the stand and talked about Jenna's passion, her dedication to protecting the environment, and her unwavering belief in doing what was right.
Even when it meant going up against powerful opponents.
Clara's words really resonated with the jury, I think. They saw Jenna as a real person, not just a victim.
And it helped that Clara was a respected journalist. Her testimony brought a sense of credibility to Jenna's side of the story.
For sure. And it reminded everyone what this trial was really about. Jenna's life and her legacy.
But the trial wasn't just about testimonies. There was also that physical evidence. And one piece in particular became a real point of contention.
The defensive wounds on Jenna's body.
Both sides had their own interpretation.
For the prosecution, those wounds were evidence that Jenna fought back, which, contradicted the defense's claim that it was a spontaneous act.
It suggested a more deliberate attack.
Right. But the defense argued that the wounds could have been inflicted accidentally. Maybe Jenna was flailing her arms in panic or trying to defend herself during a fall.
So it became a battle of interpretation.
Exactly. Who was more convincing?
And after weeks of testimony and arguments, the jury finally had to make a decision.
The tension was almost unbearable.
What was the verdict?
Guilty. But not of murder.
Manslaughter.
Yes. They acknowledged the killing, but didn't find that there was premeditation or malice.
So not a complete victory for the prosecution.
No. But every man was held accountable for his actions.
You can imagine how Pinewood Grove felt. Relieved that the trial was over, but still uncertain about what it all meant.
This was a turning point for the town. They had to confront the secrets and the tension that had been bubbling under the surface for so long.
And what about Clara?
The quest for justice had consumed her. But now, with every man behind bars, she had to figure out what was next.
What did that mean for her future, for her relationships, for her place in a town that had been changed by all of this?
Right. But just as things were settling down, a shocking discovery came to light.
What happened?
Something that changed everything we thought we knew about the case.
So every man was behind bars. But something still didn't sit right with Clara.
There were too many unanswered questions.
Like those threats Jenna was getting before she died.
And the rumors about Councilman Scott and his connection to the logging industry.
Not to mention her own father's involvement.
It all felt unfinished.
Clara knew there had to be more to the story. She couldn't just let it go.
She had to dig deeper.
So that's what she did. Went back over the evidence, talked to witnesses again.
And she found something.
Something big.
A conspiracy that went all the way to the top in Pinewood Grove.
Okay, you got to tell me. What did she uncover?
Remember all those arguments between Jenna and Councilman Scott at those town meetings?
Yeah, it seemed like more than just a difference of opinion.
It was. Clara discovered that Scott was involved in some very shady land deals with evergreen timber.
What kind of deals?
Deals that involved illegally dumping hazardous waste in the forests around Pinewood Grove.
No wonder Scott wanted Jenna out of the picture.
If she exposed him, it would have been the end of his career.
He could have ended up in jail.
Exactly.
So he used every man.
It's classic. Find someone with a motive and manipulate them.
Every man already had a grudge against Jenna, and he was known for his temper.
Scott played him like a fiddle.
This whole thing is just so messed up. People in power abusing their positions, putting an entire community at risk.
It's a story as old as time, unfortunately. But when Clara exposed this conspiracy, Pinewood Grove was in an uproar.
They felt betrayed.
By Scott, by the loading company, by anyone who knew what was happening and stayed silent.
And for Clara, it wasn't just about Scott.
Her own father.
She found out that Henry knew about the hazardous waste dumping.
And he did nothing.
He chose to look the other way, to protect his own interests.
It was a huge blow to Clara. The man she looked up to, the one who taught her about conservation, had compromised his values.
But she couldn't stay silent.
Not after everything she'd learned about Jenna, about her hometown.
So what did she do?
She went public.
Public how?
At a town hall meeting with everyone there, she called out Scott, laid out all the evidence, the land deals, the dumping every man's manipulation.
That must have been incredible.
It was, and the community was furious. They demanded justice.
And they got it.
Scott was arrested, charged with conspiracy to commit murder and a whole bunch of environmental crimes.
What about evergreen timber?
They got shut down, fined heavily, and new regulations were put in place to protect the forests.
Jenna's death brought about real change.
It did. It was a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, there's always hope, that the truth can come to light, and that justice can prevail.
It's a story that really makes you think about the choices we make, the people we trust, and the power we all have to make a difference.
Sometimes it takes a tragedy to wake people up, to expose the cracks in the facade, and to inspire real change.
We started this deep dive in Pinewood Grove, a seemingly idyllic town. But as we dug deeper, we uncovered a web of secrets and lies.
And the fight for the truth was long and hard fought.
But in the end, justice was served, and a community was forever changed.
In this case, the echoes of Innocence shows us that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope, that the truth can come to light, and that we all have a role to play in protecting what matters most.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.